Hey guys, Prowl 1701 here. Today we're going to talk about 5 times I found Doctor Who disappointing. 5 stories that were disappointing, underwhelming, did not live up perhaps to the hype, perhaps did not live up to their reputation. Just 5 stories that at the end of the day I was like, meh, could have been better. We're going to start the list with one of the most obvious and most recent choices, Empire of Death. What an underwhelming, disappointing story. The season 14, or series 14, season 1, whatever you want to call it, really ends on a whimper. Especially with one of the greatest villains that Doctor Who has ever had, which is coming from one of the greatest Doctor Who stories of all time, having Sutekh from Pyramids of Mars. And as much as I love that they brought Gabriel Wolf back, and I do love that, Legend of Ruby Sunday was interesting. But let's not pretend it wasn't really just a long teaser for the reveal of Sutekh. That's really what it is. It's just a very long advertisement for Sutekh coming back. And everything hinged on whether or not that was going to pay off with how good Empire of Death was. And Empire of Death just wasn't. It just wasn't. I mean, you realize very early on in the story that everything's going to get reset. It's just so obvious when you see everybody dying, that there's going to be a big reset button. Just like Series 3, there's going to be a big reset. So all the stakes are gone. I already knew, okay, the Doctor's going to save today. He's going to fix it. There's not going to be any consequences. Reset. Reset button. Reset. Already knew. So automatically, I'm kind of clocking out. We have the really long scene with the woman with the spoon, which feels like it needed to be a deleted scene. Does nothing for me. I don't know the actress. Apparently, it's a big deal they have her. I have no idea who she is. The actual scene just left me sitting there going, bored, man. It did nothing for me. Nothing. And then the way they beat Sutekh with the leash and the drag, it feels like it was written by a 5-year-old. It feels like Russell T. Davies wrote it when he was 5. Like he's a big fan of Sutekh and Pyramid of Mars, and 5-year-old Russell, that's what he came up with. And he dug that script out somewhere, it was probably written in crayon, and said, ooh. And it was just, childhood fulfillment, nostalgic fulfillment right there. It's so disappointing. And that's not even touching on the stuff with Ruby's mother, which is also super anticlimactic. This episode felt like it had 3 endings, and it just drug out. It was just highly disappointing, coming off a season that I found very enjoyable, especially from episodes 2 through 5, basically Devil's Cord through Dot and Bubble, which I found very good. I didn't really like Rogue much, but I thought Legend of Ruby Sunday had potential after Legend of Ruby Sunday. It was a great reveal with Sutekh coming back. But then it just kind of crapped all over the bed, honestly. And I just found it ultimately disappointing. Next on the list, moving into Big Finish, is spare parts. I do not get the love for spare parts. It does nothing for me. I did not care for this story. I actually bought this one digitally. They had it on sale for like $3. And I said, hey, spare parts. Spare parts has such a reputation. It is the Cyberman story, especially the Big Finish Cyberman story. And I'm here to tell you, Sword of Orion is way better. Way better. I did not care for spare parts. It has moments, and there are definitely ideas in there, but the way it's executed doesn't work for me. I think Peter Davison and Sarah Sutton are fine, and it's nice to know that the Doctor and Sarah had some time together between season 19 and 20. And then being on Mondas back when everything starts going wrong is a fascinating concept. But just the actual story really doesn't do much for me. I get really tired of hearing the Cybermen voices. As much as I like the voices, I get tired of them. It's fascinating what's going on with the one family and the daughter there, the daughter/sister, and what's going on with her. Some of the dialogue there is really good. But then, there's this cyber hive mind that when they're talking, I can't understand what they're saying. They're talking, I'm like, sure. It just, ultimately, by the time I got done listening to it, I was like, that's it? That's spare parts? That's the story everyone's hyping to me? Did nothing for me. Nothing. One of my least favorite Cybermen stories. Silver Nemesis is better. The Wheel in Space is better. It is quite possibly my least favorite Cybermen story. Closing Time is better. It just does nothing for me. Nothing for me. Moving into classic Doctor Who territory. The original Daleks. The Daleks. From 1963. This one I don't think is bad like the others. It's just a little disappointing because when you go into the first Dalek story, when you watch it for the first time, you expect, it's the Daleks. It's got a lot to live up to. Because most people, I don't think the Daleks is their first Dalek story. It's something you go back and watch later. And it's not easy, I think, for the original Daleks to measure up to some of the later Dalek stories. Because, it's the first story. They haven't gotten the Daleks completely ironed out. Perfectly fair. Plus, television moved much slower in the 60s, even than it did in the 70s and the 80s, to be honest. 60s Who is very much its own beast, let's be honest. People have to understand that classic Who is not just one singular entity. 60s Who and 70s Who are kind of different beasts in a way. 70s Who and 80s Who also are different beasts in some ways. And 60s Who is slow at times. It's much slower paced. And the Daleks just crawls for me. And even knowing these things, still the first time I watched it, it didn't live up to the greats, to Genesis, for example, or even to Destiny for me. It just quite doesn't hit. It's too long. It plods. The Dalek voices aren't quite there. While being good, aren't quite there sometimes. I'm not getting a lot of exterminate like I like. Again, they're still figuring it out. And I tend to get bored watching it. I've said many times on the channel I prefer the colorized version, mainly because it's shorter. I like the movie version with Cushing because it's shorter. It's just too long. The bit with them going over the canyon with the rope feels drawn. Let's be honest. I think even the most diehard fan of the original Daleks will admit there's some padding. There's some padding there. And so it's not that I think it's bad. I think the original Daleks is okay. I just find it underwhelming going back at it. Coming at it after having seen so many other Dalek stories ahead of it, if that makes sense. It just doesn't quite live up to what the original Dalek story would have been in my head growing up, if that makes sense. So that one is not bad like the first two we talked about. It's just, I just found it disappointing and not living up to the standards I had set for what a Dalek story should be the first time I saw the Daleks. Next on the list is the Stones of Venice. Back to Big Finish with the 8th Doctor. Did not care for this one. And, I was coming off a bit of an 8th Doctor high because I had listened to Chimes of Midnight, I had listened to Storm Warning, and I had listened to Sword of Orion. All three of those, very good. Really liked those stories. Was enjoying some early 8th Doctor Big Finish stuff. It was on a roll with me, and then I ran into Stones of Venice. And that's like hitting a brick wall. It wasn't good. The story is bad. It's a little weird. And some of the stuff in the story is blatantly obvious. Like there's this one woman character. I figured out who she was way earlier than I probably should have. I'm like, okay, it's this. It's doing this. That's who this is. And I ended up being right. I'm like, I just found it underwhelming. The 8th Doctor doesn't really get a lot to do. Charlie's fine. Very underwhelming when I was coming off of an 8th Doctor high with Big Finish. Because I had read, or listened to, I should say, 3 very good 8th Doctor stories. So I was really, 8th Doctor's killing it on Big Finish. And then I ran into Stones of Venice. I haven't listened to another 8th Doctor story, I think, yet. Other than when he showed up in Klein's story, which was really, really good. But yeah, just Stones of Venice was just hugely disappointing. One, I don't think it was just very good in general, but it was highly disappointing considering I had just had such a good run of McGann stories until I hit that. And then that kind of hit it. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to need an 8th Doctor break for a minute because it just wasn't good. It just was not good. I felt like I'd wasted my time listening to it. And then last, we're going to circle back around to modern Doctor Who with The Timeless Children. Now, I'm not going to just say to Timeless Children because it's bad. It is bad. But part of the problem with me is that I found it disappointing because I had been enjoying Series 12 for the most part. Up to that. I've talked on the channel many times about I actually like Series 12 a lot. It's pretty consistently good. Matter of fact, I think it's more consistently good than any of the Capaldi era. And I like Capaldi's Doctor much more than Whittaker's Doctor, but all 3 seasons of the Capaldi era are mixed bags. Really good episodes and really bad episodes, all 3 of them. Matter of fact, Series 12 is the most consistently good since Series 5 to me. Because I like most of it. I really enjoyed Spyfall. Orphan 55 is not that good. It has a couple things in it does really nice, but it's not really that good. But the Tesla episode's great. Fugitive of the Jadoon is great. And then you have Praxius, which is just kind of there. It's just forgettable. It's the terminus of the modern series. And then you had Can You Hear Me, which is fantastic. And Whittaker probably has her best moment in the role there. So you had Spyfall, which, again, 2 episodes. The Tesla, Fugitive of the Jadoon, and Can You Hear Me. You had 5 episodes kind of going into these last 3 that were really good. Then you have The Haunting of Villa Diodati, which is really good. I really need to go back and rewatch that at some point. I really liked it on the first time. I love the concept of the Cybermen. I love the imagery of that episode a lot. I like how it deals with the Doctor interacting with Mary Shelley, which I think the 8th Doctor's done in the audios, if I remember correctly. I haven't listened to that, but I think that's true. I liked what the Haunting of Villa Diodati was doing. Ascension of the Cybermen I thought was pretty good. I enjoyed a lot of the setup there. I love the callbacks to early weaknesses of the Daleks like radiation and gold and all that. The flying heads was interesting. The guy playing the kind of old man guy, the old white guy, I don't know his name. He's an interesting character. The actor playing him is pretty neat. And it ends on a really nice cliffhanger. I enjoyed Ascension of the Cybermen. I feel like Timeless Children kind of hurts it a little by association, but it's still fine. It's not a bad lead up. It works as a penultimate episode pretty well. So I was riding really high on Series 12, even thinking I was going to have to do a video at the time. Before the final episode, I was like, am I going to have to do a video calling Series 12 the best since Series 5? And then the Timeless Children happened. And it's just so disappointing because the rest of the season had been so good. It's not just the fact that Timeless Children is a god-awful episode, because how it just destroys canon, hurts the lore, rewrites the Doctor's past and history for no reason whatsoever. No good reason whatsoever. And then there's the fact it once again makes the Cybermen the Master's servants, basically, slaves, basically, again. And then the fact it has to Deus Ex Machina the ending, wiping everything out. Again, it once again craps all over the Cybermen, doesn't use the Cybermen properly, kills the lone Cyberman, which is a shame because he was a fascinating character. I was hoping we'd get him back, and we kind of did in Power of the Doctor, but not really. Let's be honest. It was such a cool character. They should have kept him around. I loved his design, and I loved his just as a concept. I really liked him. I wouldn't mind seeing that idea revisited. And it just kind of crapped on everything. And it just kind of had the season end on a whimper. I don't think it's quite as bad as Empire of Death. Because while it hurting the Doctor's lore, it's not crapping all over a classic story. Kind of like how Empire of Death kind of wants to crap on Pyramids of Mars. I don't think it hurts Pyramids of Mars. Pyramids of Mars is still amazing. But the fact it just feels kind of an insult to Pyramids of Mars. Although, to be fair, Timeless Children just kind of feels like an insult to classic Doctor Who in general. With it retconning stuff. And I see how it tries to tie it in with stuff like the Morbius Doctors. And it's interesting that it tries to connect those dots. Doesn't really work for me because I always considered those extra faces to be Morbius, honestly. To be Morbius's past incarnations. Even if the dialogue does kind of make you wonder how far back the Doctor goes. I'm not saying there aren't things in Classic Who that could lend itself to the idea of pre-Hartnell Doctors. I'm simply saying I don't like the way the Timeless Children went about it. Plus, there's just that whole story of Take Day-Un and the Doctor not being a Time Lord and the Doctor being the chosen one. It just... I like the Doctor being a less than average Time Lord who didn't have the best grades, who decided to leave. I like the fact the Doctor isn't like the best of his race. He's just somebody who left, who got bored. Anyone could be the Doctor. And now they're making it, well, nope, Doctor was Space Jesus. Space Jesus! And is the chosen one. And if you're not born lucky or chosen, well, suck it up, Buttercup. Life's going to be hard for you. That's kind of the message that Chris Chibnall seems to be pushing here. And I just didn't like that. I found it highly disappointing. It wouldn't, I still would have hated it, but it wouldn't have been as disappointing if it had been in a bad season. Like if it had ended Series 11 or Flux, which are the 2 worst seasons Doctor Who's ever put out. While I still would have hated it, it wouldn't have been so disappointing. But because I like Series 12 for the most part and thought it was a very strong season with some very good writing, it's very disappointing that the series ends on such a whimper when I liked so much of it leading up to that. So those are 5 Doctor Who stories that I find disappointing, underwhelming, and just kind of a letdown. I want to know what you think of those stories and what 5 stories you would list are from the story or from expanded media. 5 stories you want to talk about that just did not work for you, did not live up to the hype, etc., etc. Comment down below. Let's talk about it. Don't forget to click the like button and the subscribe button and the bell for notifications so you never miss out on another video. I also have a Patreon if you would like to support what I do. There is a link to that down in the description below. I want to give a shout out to a couple of my top tier patrons, Colin Coney and Finn Perkins. I appreciate their support as I do the support of all of my patrons. It's very much appreciated. I also have a P.O. box down there as well. If there's anything you'd like to send me to look at and review, a link to my Amazon wishlist is down there. A link to my Amazon UK wishlist is also down there as well. Most importantly, thank you for watching.